Chapter 1. One of Us is Lying. Brownie. Monday, September 24th, 2:55 p.m. A sex tape, a pregnancy scare, 2 cheating scandals, and that's just this week's update. If you all knew about Bayview High with Simon Kellner's gossip app, you'd wonder how any of us found time to go to class. Old News Bryons says a voice set over my shoulder. Wait till you see tomorrow's post. Damn, I hate getting caught reading about that, especially by its creator. I lower my phone and slam my locker shut. Whose lives are you ruining next, Simon? Simon falls into step beside me. I move against the flow of students heading for exit. It's a public service, he says, with a dismissive wave. You tutor Reggie Crowley, don't you? Wouldn't you rather know he has a camera in his bedroom? I wouldn't bother answering. Me getting anywhere near the bedroom of perpetual stoner Reggie Crowley is about as likely as Simon growing a conscience. Anyway, they bring it on to themselves. If people didn't lie and cheat, I'd be out of business. Simon's cold blue eyes take off of my lightning strides. Where are you rushing off to? Covering yourself from the extracurricular glory? I wish. As if you taught me. An alert crosses my phone. Mathlete practice, 3 p.m. Epcot coffee. Followed by a text from one of my teammates. Evan's here. Of course he is. The cute mathlete. Less of an oxymoron than you might think. Seems to only ever show up when I can't. Not exactly, I say. As a general rule, and especially lately, I've been trying to give Simon a little information as possible. We push through green metal doors to the back stairwell, a dividing line between the dignesses of the original Bayview High and its bright, airy new wing. Each year, more wealthy families get to price out of San Diego and come 15 miles east to Bayview, expecting that their tax dollars will buy them a nicer school experience than popcorn ceilings and scattered linoleum. Simon's still on my heels when I reached up Mr. Avery's lab on the 3rd floor. I have to turn with my arms crossed. Don't you have someplace to be? Yeah, detention, Simon says, and waits for me to keep walking. And then I grasp the knob. Instead, he bursts out laughing. You're kidding me, you two? What's your crime? I was wrongfully accused, I mutter, and I yank the door open. 3 other students are already seated. Then I pause to take them in. Not the group I would have predicted, except one. Nate Macaulay. His tips his chair back and smirks at me. You make a wrong turn? This is detention, not student council. He should know. Nate's been in trouble since 5th grade, which is right about the time we last spoke. The gossip mill tells me he's on probation with Bayview's finest. For something. It might be a DUI, it might be some drug dealing. It's not a notorious supplier. But to my knowledge, it's purely theoretical. Save the commentary. Mr. Avery checks something off the clipboard and closes the door behind Simon. High-arched windows lining the back wall of the single send triangles of afternoon sun splashing across the floor, and a faint sounds of football practices float from the field behind the parking lot below. I take a seat as Cooper Clay, who's palming a crumpled piece of paper like a baseball, whispers, "Heads up, Addie," and tosses it towards the girl across from him. Addie Prentice blinks, smiles uncertainly, and lets the ball drop to the floor. The classroom clock inches towards 3, and I follow its progression with a helpful feeling of injustice. I shouldn't even be here. I should be at Epcot coffee, flirting awkwardly with Evan Nahum over differential equations. Mr. Avery is a give detention first, ask questions never kind of guy. But maybe there's still time for us to change his mind. I clear my throat and start to raise my hand until I notice Nate's smirk. Berending. Mr. Avery, that wasn't my phone you found. I don't know how it got into my bag. This is mine, I say, brandishing my iPhone in its melon-striped case. Honestly, you would have been clueless to bring your phone to Mr. Avery lab. He had strict no phone policy and spends like the first 10 minutes of every class rooting through backpacks like he's a head of an airline security. And we were all on the watch list. My phone was back in my locker like always. You too? Addie turns to me so quickly. Her blonde shampoo ad hair swirls around her shoulders. She must have been strategically removed from her boyfriend in order to show up alone. That wasn't my phone either. Me three, Cooper chimes in. His southern accent makes it sound like Thray. He and Addie exchange the surprising looks, and I wonder how this is news to them when they were a part of the same clique. Maybe an Iparabola people have better things to talk about than unfair detentions. Somebody punked us. Simon leans forward with his elbows on the desk, looking spring-loaded and ready to pounce on fresh gossip. His gaze darts at all four of us, clustered in the middle of the otherwise empty classroom, before settling on Nate. Why would anyone want to trap a bunch of students with mostly spotless records in detention? It seems like the sort of thing that, I don't know, a guy who's in here all the time might do for fun. I look at Nate, but I can't picture it. Rigging detention sounds like work, and everything about Nate, from his messy dark hair to the ratty Letterman jacket, screams, can't be bothered. Or yawns it, maybe. He meets my eyes and doesn't say a word, just tips his chair back even further, another millimeter, and he'll fall right over. Cooper sits up straighter, a frown crossing his Captain America face. Hang on. I thought it was just a mix-up, but if the same thing happened to all of us, maybe it's somebody's stupid idea of a prank. And I'm missing baseball practice because of it. He says, it's like a heart surgeon being detained from a life-saving operation. Mr. Avery rolls his eyes. Save the conspiracy theories for another teacher. I'm not buying it. You all know the rules against bringing phones to class, and you broke them. He gives Simon an especially sour glance. Teachers know all about that exists, but there's not much they can do to stop it. Simon uses the initials to identify people and never talks openly about school. Now listen up. You're here until 4. I want each of you to write a 500-word essay about how technology is ruining American high schools. Anyone who cannot follow the rules gets another detention tomorrow. What do we write with? Addie says. There aren't any computers here. Most classrooms have Chromebooks. But Mr. Avery, who looks like he should have retired decades ago, is a holdout. Mr. Avery crosses to Addie's desk and taps the corner of a yellow-lined notepad. We all have one. Explore the magic of long handwriting in its lost art. Addie's pretty heart-shaped face is a mask of confusion. But how do we know we have reached 500 words? Count, Mr. Avery replies. His eyes drop to the phone I'm still holding, and hand that over, Miss Rodriguez, or Rojas. It doesn't the fact that you're confiscating my phone twice give you a pause? Who has 2 phones? I ask. Nate grins. So I almost miss it. Seriously, Mr. Avery, somebody was playing a joke on us. Mr. Avery's snowy mustache twitches with annoyance, and he extends his hands to the beckoning motion. Phone, Miss Rojas? Unless you want a return visit. I give it over with a sigh. He looks disapprovingly at the others. The phones I took from the rest of you earlier are in my desk. You get them back after detention. Addie and Cooper exchange the amused glance, probably because their actual phones are safely in their backpacks. Mr. Avery tosses my phone into a drawer and sits behind the teacher's desk, opening a book as he prepares to ignore us for the next hour. I pull out a pen, tap it against my yellow notepad, and contemplate the assignment. Does Mr. Avery really believe technology is ruining schools? That's a pretty sweeping statement to make over a few contraband phones. Maybe it's a trap. He's looking for us to contradict him instead of instead of agree. I glance at Nate, who's bent over his notepad, writing computer suck all over and over into block letters. It's possible I'm overthinking this. Cooper, Monday, September 24th, 3:05 p.m. My hand hurts within minutes. It's pathetic, I guess. But I can't remember the last time I wrote anything longhand. Plus, I'm using my right hand, which never feels natural, no matter how many years I've done it. My father insists I learned to write right-handed in second grade after he first saw me pinch. Your left arm's gold, he told me. Don't waste it on crap that don't matter. Which is anything but pitching. As far as he's concerned. That's when he started calling me Cooperstown, like baseball Hall of Fame. Nothing like putting a little pressure on an 8-year-old. Simon reaches for his backpack and roots around, unzipping every section he hoists into his lap and peer inside. Where the hell is my water bottle? No talking, Mr. Kellner, Mr. Avery says without looking up. I know, but my water bottle is missing, and I'm thirsty. Mr. Avery points towards the sink in the back of the room and it's countered crowded with beakers and Perry dishes. Get yourself a drink, quietly. Simon gets up and grabs a cup from the stack on the counter, filling it with water from the tap. He heads back to his seat and puts the cup on the desk. Seems distracted by Nate, me methodically writing. Dude, he says, kicking his sneakers against the leg of Nate's desk. Seriously? Did you put those phones in your backpack in our backpacks to mess around with us? Now Mr. Avery looks up, frowning. I said quietly, Mr. Kellner. Nate leans back with his arms crossed. Why would I do that? Simon shrugs. Why do you do anything? So you have a company for whatever your screw up of the day was? One more word out of either of you and it's detention tomorrow, Mr. Avery warns. Simon opens his mouth anyway, but before he can speak, there's a sound of tires squealing and then a crash of two cars hitting each other. Addie gasps, but I brace myself against my desk like somebody just rear-ended me. Nate, who looks glad for the interruption, is the first on his feet towards the window. Who gets a fender bender in the school parking lot, he asks. Mr. Brownie looks at Mr. Avery like she's asking for permission, and then when he gets up from his desk, she heads to the window as well. Addie follows her, and I finally unfold myself from the seat. I might as well see what's going on. I lean against the ledge looking outside, and Simon comes up beside me with a despairing laugh, and he surveys the scene below. 2 cars, an old red one and a nondescript gray one, are smashed into each other at a right angle. We all stare at them in silence until Mr. Avery lets out an exasperated sigh. I better make sure no one's hurt. He runs his eyes over all of us and zeroes in on Brownie. As the most responsible one of the bunch, Miss Rojas, keep the room contained until I get back. Okay, Brownie says, casting a nervous glance towards Nate. We stay at the window watching the scene below, but before Mr. Avery another teacher appears at the window outside, both cars start their engines and drive off out of the parking lot. Well, that was anticlimactic, Simon says. He heads back to his desk and picks up his cup, but instead of sitting down, he wanders to the front of the room and scans the periodic table of elements poster. He leans out into the hallway like he's about to leave, but then he turns and raises his cup like he's toasting. Anyone else want some water? I do, Addie says, slipping into her chair. Get it yourself, princess, Simon smirks. Addie rolls her eyes and stays put while Simon's leaning against Mr. Avery's desk. Literally, huh? What'll you do with yourself now that homecoming is over? Big gap between now and senior prom. Addie looks at me without answering. I don't blame her. Simon's train of thought almost never has to go anywhere good when it comes to our friends. He acts like he's above caring whether he's popular and was pretty smug when he was wounded up on people of the junior prom court last spring. I'm still not sure how he pulled that off, unless he traded keeping secrets for votes. Simon was nowhere to be found on homecoming court last week, though. I was voted king, so maybe I'm the next one on his list to harass, or whatever the hell he's doing. What's your point, Simon? I ask, taking a seat next to Addie. Addie and I aren't close exactly, but I kind of feel protective of her. She's been dating my best friend since freshman year, and she is the sweetest girl, also not the kind of person who knows how to stand up to a guy like Simon, just who won't quit. She's a princess and you're a jock, he says. He thrusts his chin towards Brownie, then Nate. And you're a brain, and you're a criminal. You're all walking teen movie stereotypes. What about you, Brownie asks. She's been hovering near the window, but now goes to her desk and perches over the top of it. She crosses her legs and pulls her dark ponytail over one shoulder. Something about her is cuter this year. New glasses, maybe? Longer hair? All of a sudden, she's kind of working this sexy nerd thing. I'm the omnibus narrator, Simon says. Brownie's brows raise above her black frames. There's no such thing in teen movies. But Bronwyn. Simon winks and chugs his water one last gulp, if there's such a thing in life. He says that like a threat, and I wonder if he's got something on Bronwyn for that stupid app of his. I hate that thing. Almost all my friends have been on it at one point or another, and sometimes it causes real problems. My buddy Lewis and his girlfriend broke up because of something Simon wrote. Though it was a true story about Lewis hooking up with his girlfriend's cousin. But still. That doesn't have to be published. Hallway gossip is bad enough. And if I'm being honest, I'm pretty freaked about what Simon could write about me if he puts his mind to it. Simon holds up his cup grimmingly and this tastes like crap. He drops the cup and I roll my eyes at the attempt at his drama. Even when he falls to the floor, I still think he's messing around. But then wheezing starts. Brownie's on her feet first and kneeling beside him. Simon, she says, shaking his shoulders. Are you okay? What happened? Can you talk? Her voice goes from concerned to panicky, and that's not enough for me to get moving, but Nate's faster, shoving past me and crouching next to Bronwyn. A pen, he says, scanning Simon's brick red face. You have a pen? Simon nods widely, his hand clawing at his throat. I grabbed the pen off my desk and tried to hand it to Nate. He's thinking about his emergency tracheotomy or something. Nate just stares at me like I have two heads. An EpiPen, he says, reaching for Simon's backpack. He's having an allergic reaction. Addie stands and wraps her arms around her body, not saying a word. Bronwyn turns to me, face flushed. I'm gonna go to find a teacher and call 911. Stay with him, okay? She grabs her phone out of Mr. Avery's drawer and runs into the hallway. I kneel next to Simon. His eyes are bugging out of his head, lips are blue, and he's making horrible choking noises. Nate dumps the entire contents of Simon's backpack onto the floor and scrabbles through a mess of books, papers, and clothes. Simon, where do you keep it? He asks, tearing open the small front compartment and yanking out 2 regular pens and a set of keys. Simon's way of talking through sweaty palms on his shoulder. Like that'll do any good. You're okay. You're gonna be okay. We're getting help. I hear my voice slowly thickening and like molasses. My accent always comes out hard when I'm stressed. I turn to Nate and ask, you sure he's not choking on something? Maybe he needs a Heimlich maneuver, not a freaking medical pen. Nate ignores me, tossing Simon's empty backpack aside. Frick, he yells, slamming a fist on the door. You keep it on, Nate? Do you keep it on you, Simon? Simon's eyes roll back into the back of his head as Nate digs out around Simon's pockets, but it does not find anything except for a wrinkled Kleenex. Sirens blare in the distance as Mr. Avery and 2 other teachers race with Bronwyn trailing behind them on her phone. We can't find his EpiPen, Nate says treacherously, gesturing to the pile of Simon's things. Mr. Avery stares at Simon in a slow-jacked horror. or slack-jawed horror for a second, then turns to me. Cooper, the nurse's office has EpiPens. They should be labeled in plain sight. Hurry. I run into the hallway, hearing footsteps behind me that fade into as I quickly reach the back of the stairwell and yank the door open. I take the stairs 3 at a time until I'm on the first floor and weave through the few straggling students until I get to the nurse's office. The door is ajar and nobody's there. There's a cramped little space with an extra table up against the windows and a big gray storage cabinet looming on my left. I scan through the room, my eyes landing on two wall-mounted white boxes with red block lettering. One says emergency defibrillator, the other says emergency EpiPens. I fumbled at the latch on the second one and I pull it open. There's nothing inside. I open the other box with a plastic device with a picture of a heart. I'm pretty sure that's not what I'm rummaging through the gray storage cabinet, pulling out boxes of bandages, aspirin. I don't see anything that looks like a pen. Cooper, did you find them? Miss Grayson, one of the teachers who had entered the lab with Mr. Avery and Brownie, barrels into the room. She's panicking hard. Clutching her side, I gesture towards the empty wall-mounted box. They should be right here, but they're not. Check the supply cabinet, Miss Grayson said, ignoring the Band-Aid boxes scattered across the floor that prove I had already tried. Another teacher joins us. We tear apart the office as the sound of sirens get closer. When we open the last cabinet, Miss Grayson wipes a trickle of sweat off of her forehead with the back of her hand. Cooper, let Mr. Avery know that we haven't found anything yet. Mr. Connors, I'll keep looking. I get to Mr. Avery's lab at the same time as the paramedics do. There were 3 of them, in navy uniforms, 2 pushing a long white stretcher and racing ahead of the clear small crowd that has gathered around the door. And I wait there until they're all inside and I slip behind them. Mr. Avery is slumped next to the chalkboard in his yellow dress shirt, untucked. We couldn't find the pens, I tell him. He runs a shaking hand through his thin white hair as one of the paramedics stabs Simon with a syringe and the 2 others lift him into the stretcher. God help that boy, he whispers. More to himself than me, I think. Addie is standing off the side by herself, tear rolling down her cheeks. I cross over to her and put my arm around her shoulders as the paramedics maneuver Simon's stretcher into the hallway. Can you come along? One asks Mr. Avery. He nods and follows. Leaving the empty room except for a few shell-shocked teachers and 4 of us who were started detention with Simon barely 15 minutes ago. By my guess, but it feels like hours. Is he okay now? Addie asked in a strangled voice. Brownie claps her phone between her palms as she uses it to pray. Nate stands with his hands on his hips, staring at the door as more teachers and students trickling inside. I'm going to go out on a limb and say no, he says. My thoughts on this chapter are that it took a turn for the worst halfway through. And I think it was a very, not rough chapter, but it was a very quick chapter. It went by really, really quickly. One thing is I think that all these kids were set up and that within hopefully the next few chapters, but I think definitely by the end of the book, we'll find out exactly who did it. I don't think it was one of the 4 students that were in that room with him, but it definitely could be. And yeah,